7. We're going to rise for the pledge, and after that, we will be observing a moment of silence. Please keep all of those in your thoughts and prayers that are protecting us, public safety, those in our armed forces, and anyone that you would like to share in your personal thoughts this morning. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. One quick note procedurally before we get into the next area here on the agenda. If you are here today, if anyone is here today in the audience for the public hearing, you are to sign in on the sheet on the table in the back of the room. And if you would like to speak, you need to complete an orange card and give it to our county administrator. I feel like I should be like the Price is Right. So. Okay. Before we do this, let's go into Positively Carol, which, by the way, starting next week, we're going to change it a little bit. We're going to be calling it Priority Carol. So don't get confused, okay? But we're going to just switch things up just a tad. But today, it's Positively Priority Carol.
And with that, I like to state that last night I sat on the Board of Education for Commissioner Weaver since he was busy on other duties. And it was nice to see all the teachers come out and voice their opinions about the budget process. As always, they're concerned about their salaries. Sometimes it's heart-wrenching to hear the teachers talk about how much money they personally spend on supplies because of their passion for teaching. So myself and other commissioners sincerely appreciate them speaking about this issue, and we'll all do everything we can to help them out. The second thing I like to talk about is on Tuesday, we were able to get staffers from both Senator Cardin and Van Hollen, plus Congressman Raskin, to come out and meet with us in Union Bridge to address their long-term flooding problem. It's a process, it's going to be long-term, but I think it's paramount for us to get the ball rolling to help those citizens up there in a very small section of my district, but they're just as much citizens as everyone else, and we're going to do everything we can in the future to try to help solve their flooding issues. So I'm very grateful for all the people that came together to start this moving.
And Monday, you and I both attended the Tech Center, part of the Tech Center graduations out here, and I'm really impressed with the number of young men and women in some of these trades coming out of the Tech Center, and they have their January graduation presentation right now. And we were able to attend some of them, not all of them, but it's rewarding to see those young people walk across the stage, and I think we're going to be in good hands.
The Tech Center is a tremendous asset to this community because a lot of students don't want to go off to college. They get a 4-year degree, but they can get a career in technology training and potentially move on into the community college to broaden their horizon and their knowledge and potentially become small business people in the community. So I can't say enough good things about the Career and Technology Center.
Very good.
On this, I think this past Saturday, I went to the Roar of the Robots over at Elmer Wolf Elementary School, where they had young groups. These are middle school and elementary school kids that came together and built these Lego robots and had motors and they had missions to accomplish on a particular table. And each group had to accomplish as many minutes they could and as many missions as they could in a certain amount of time, and they were scored on that. And it was actually extremely well attended. I was wondering whether it was going to have it or not because of the snow and all that happened around that time. And I get there and the parking lot is packed, and the stands are full. A lot of people yelling and screaming as much as you get for robots. But it was very well attended. The kids did a great job.
For me, it's a positive carol on a relatively somber note, and that is in dealing with the opioids and drug addiction evil that we have in our community, our county. I had the opportunity to interview a very close friend of mine, Tammy Lofink, who runs Rising Above Addiction, and we put on the radio on Sunday, it's also, I know it's out there as well. And the focus was on her commitment in dealing with this issue. Very positive in her approach, being able to reach out to a whole lot of folks in our community, understanding that it takes not just one effort, but a very holistic effort from education to safety, security, schools, community, congregations, neighbors, working together. And she, I believe, is a testament to that in standing this up 3 years ago after her son Rob passed 4 years ago, relatively to this date. So, good. That's all.
Okay, just real quick for me, last week we experienced some weather issues. I want to give a shout out to all the folks in Public Works. We had our facilities folks and everybody who was dealing with the weather. It's one thing to plow snow and clear sidewalks. It's another to do it when it's like -8 degrees. So I want to just give a shout out to everybody who worked on that. We have the best anywhere, I will tell you. So continuing, we have this morning we're joined by Janice Kispert from Ray Crisis of Carroll, and with that we have a proclamation presentation in reference to Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, and I'm going to hand it over to my first Vice President, Commissioner Rothstein, to handle the duties for the proclamation.
It's an honor to share with you the Proclamation 06-2019, National Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. Whereas 23% of women and 14% of men who are victims of contact sexual violence, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime first experienced these or other forms of violence by the partner before age 18. And whereas victims of teen dating violence are more likely to experience symptoms of depression and anxiety, engage in unhealthy behaviors, exhibit antisocial behaviors, and or think about suicide. And whereas violence in adolescent relationships sets the stage for problems in future relationships, including intimate partner violence and sexual violence perpetration and or victimization throughout life. And whereas supporting the development of healthy, respectful, and nonviolent relationships has the potential to reduce the occurrence of teen dating violence and prevent its harmful and long-lasting effects on individuals, their families, and the communities where they live. And whereas the elimination of teen and lifelong dating violence must be achieved through the cohesive effort of individuals, organizations, and communities. And whereas Rape Crisis Intervention Service of Carroll County, in conjunction with other organizations nationwide, designates the month of February as an excellent opportunity to promote awareness and prevention of teen dating violence, including supporting those organizations and individuals who provide advocacy services and assistance to victims. Now, therefore, we, the Commissioners of Carroll County, do hereby proclaim February 2019 as Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. We all have the undersigned.
So we do this every year, and Janice, if you'd just like to say a few words in reference to the proclamation, and then we'll have a photo op down front, and perhaps introduce the folks that you have brought with you this morning as well.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you all for your continued support. I'd like to introduce our Vice President of our Board of Trustees, Norma Jean Swam. I think you recognize that last name, just saying.
Is there somebody here that, never mind.
He's probably behind you somewhere.
And Johanna Viator, who is our new outreach specialist. So thank you all for your continued support. I'm so humbled by your commitment to making a better quality of life for the citizens of Carroll County. So thank you all very much for your continued support. We really appreciate it.
And now is your time for your commercial.
And if you mention it, yes, thank you. We have our upcoming men's walk, so Commissioner Frazier, get your shoes ready, yes? He's allowed to wear flats. Just,
Wait,
you
wait,
know,
what?
Just saying.
I'm too tall to wear the heel.
Oh, that's,
Come on.
So we hope you can all join us on Saturday, April 13th.
I will be there.
So registration is open.
I know quicker route, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we've changed the route. We've changed the route this year. Start and finish at City Park, so,
Okay.
yes. So thank you.
Let's all gather here in the front, if you will.
If we got any bigger maintenance, I'll have to open up these passwords.
That's your test to see if you fit enough.
Okay, Janice, thank you. You guys, Norma Jean, all of you guys over there do a tremendous job, and we certainly do appreciate what you do for our county. You're kind of one of those unsung hero groups, and we certainly do appreciate what you do. So, again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, again, a reminder, if you're here for the public hearing, which is next, make sure you signed up and fill out an orange card. Public hearing on water sewer master plan triennial update. And our Director of Planning, Linda Eisenberg, and the planner in Department of Planning also, Price Wagner. Folks, good morning.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Commissioners. Thank you for having us here this morning. As you said, we are here for the public hearing for the Water and Sewer Master Plan Triennial Update. We have a brief presentation just to refresh your memories about what we're here for today, as well as for the audience.
You have those.
Mr. President, this hearing is required under Section 9-503 of the Environment Article, and you are required to accept public comments regarding the triennial update. It was advertised in the Carroll County Times on January 24th and January 31st, 2019, in accordance with the law.
Okay,
Actually, I was going to start with that. So, as Attorney Burke said, and
check that off, Price.
exactly, check that off. So, appreciate that. Yes, it was duly advertised on the 24th and 31st in the Carroll County Times. Again, this is the triennial update, which is required roughly every 3 years by the Department of Department of Environment by the State of Maryland. The county updates this document for the county-owned facilities, which is the Freedom, as well as the Hampstead Sewer Facility, and it's also for all the municipal facilities we have out there. In order for a project to be permitted by MDE, it must be listed in the Water and Sewer Master Plan. And again, just as a quick refresher, the big changes in the Freedom, where the Freedom Community Comprehensive Plan was adopted in 2018, some properties were added to priority services while others were placed in the long-range service area. And in the city of Westminster, they adopted their water and sewer allocation policy and placing roughly 70% of new allocation for commercial industrial. Anything existing or in the pipeline that already has a site plan or a recorded plat is still good in the priority area, but any new residential development would be in long range, and at that point in time, they're only looking to do one new house within the city limits and one new house outside the city limits. And then all the amendments to the 2014 Water and Sewer Master Plan, which we have 3 over the course of the year, have been incorporated into the triennial update. Again, the service areas in blue, these are the water service areas for, you got Manchester, Hampstead, Tawnytown, the Freedom Service Area, Mount Airy, Union Bridge, and New Windsor, and of course here's Westminster. And then these are the sewer service areas. And here's the city of Westminster. You can see majority of stuff that is dark green is existing, the lighter green is priority, and if you see any really light green for sewer or water, mainly for water, that's going to be for future, and those are all considered industrial or commercial properties. And this is the updated Freedom Service areas we have, where the properties, these properties were added, as well as down here for the sewer service area. So, yeah, thank you. And the other one is that right there. Right. Just want to make sure, thank you. The Gibson property, and then the water service area. And finally, staff has not received any comments to date, either from MDE for the Westminster edition chapter they've seen, or for what we sent them for the Freedom update. The record is to remain open for 10 days. And then finally, discussion decision to adopt the water and sewer master plan. I think we'll try to put that on the agenda for February 21st. And then finally, once the plan is adopted and the resolution is granted by the commission, we will forward this to Department of Environment for their final approval. The plan does not go into effect until the MDE gives final approval. And then we're looking probably for final approval roughly late spring, early summer, depending on their timeline of review. And we're hoping late spring may happen, since we sent all the chapters out previously for them to look at in draft form.
What's the typical timeline for MDE to say, okay? Is there an answer to that?
Yeah, so they have expedited their process over the last several years. So it's supposed to be like a 90-day turnaround as opposed to 180-day. So we're
Okay.
hoping, in 3 months we'll have an approval from them, especially given what Price said, that they have reviewed all of the chapters, and any concerns that they had, we'd addressed prior to anything. And with regards to the Freedom, which we sent them as our last element, they have not responded back, so there's no comments from them as well.
Okay. All right. Good?
Yes.
Good. Mr. Burke?
Any questions of staff from the board? Mr. President, at this point, it's appropriate to take any comments from the public. Do we have any comment cards? Do any members of the public wish to speak? Mr. President, it appears we have no comments from the public.
All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing and keep the record open for a period of 10 days.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Okay, next on the agenda, request approval for public comment and public hearing on the housing annual plan. And our Director of Citizen Services, Christine Kay, and I'll let you, well, I know who they are. From your chief is Daniel Yates, and the program manager over there, Mr. Paul Moffett. Folks, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So as you remember, last week we were here with updates to the annual plan for the Bureau of Housing's streamlined annual plan. Each year we have to put it out for public comment and public review for 45 days. Are there any questions about the changes we made from last week?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think we were, okay. Do any of my colleagues have any?
No.
We all looked them over, and, that's why we wanted that extra week, I know,
Right.
to make sure that we were good with it,
We
so.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. So, is that it?
That's it? We just need approval to go to
Okay.
public comment and review for 45 days.
All right. I trust my colleagues did their homework. And if that is the case, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay. I move the Board of Commissioners approve the display of the streamlined annual plan for 45 days for public review and comment. Also announce a public hearing prior to April 17, 2019, to consider approval to submit the FY19 annual plan to HUD.
Second.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments? And of course, we'll go through the normal public hearing procedure when we announce that date. Okay. Got a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No opposed. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Why can't they all be that easy?
On the theme of streamlining, we're rolling right along. Well, until now. Next on the agenda is a report from the Carroll County Volunteer Emergency Services Association Work Group. This is a progress report on the future of fire, rescue, and emergency medical services in Carroll. And I'll invite to, he's already up here, Mr. Tom Coe, who is the, what's your official title, Tom? The chair of that committee? Is that
Lots of hats.
Yeah.
Yes, I chair the joint
Okay.
work group committee.
Okay. And I don't know if you want to invite anybody else or just have them all sit, in the background or, anybody want to yell or throw
What they've told me
anything
is
yet?
they're comfortable.
Really?
They're comfortable.
It's interesting.
Yeah, comfortable.
Okay.
Good
Tom,
morning, Commissioners. I promise you that we won't be quite as short as the last presentation. Yeah, last two. So good morning. We were last before you in September of 2017, and as promised, we wanted to come back and provide an update on where the work group's progress has been, provide you some of our work products for your review, and really speak about what we see as the future of this project moving forward. So some of the folks I brought with me are the work group members with us today. Dennis Beard from the Sykesville Fire Department. Tim Brown from the Gamburn Community Volunteer Fire Company.
Yeah, just raise your hands as he's introducing for the thousands of viewers.
Perry Jones, who is from the Union Bridge Fire Company, as well as the second vice president of CC Visa. Don Love from the recent Community Volunteer Fire Department. And then from our county government partners, we have Scott Campbell, the Director of Public Safety, Douglas Brown, the Deputy Director of Public Works, Ted Zaleski, the Director of Management and Budget, Lynn Carr, Senior Budget Analyst, and Kim Frock, the Director of Human Resources. And in addition to the work group members, we have several representatives from both our career and volunteer workforce with us today. So we really wanted to start this presentation with some information that three of you have seen before, but allow our two new commissioners to receive some of the information to understand the background of the work group's inception and why we are here today. So not unlike many other fire services in the state and the nation, the volunteer fire service is facing some significant struggles. First and foremost is a decrease in the number of volunteers. And that's really bigger than the fire service itself. If you talk to church groups and rec councils and any other agency that relies on volunteer person power, there are struggles with getting volunteers in today's society. The volunteer fire service is no different, and our training and membership requirements really cause that struggle to be amplified. Along with the decreasing volunteers, we're faced with the aging of our current incumbent force. So one of the things I talk to the folks around the fire service a lot about is I always see people as the age they were when I was 21. So Commissioner Wance will always be 30 to me. But
you just made some points there, baby.
Well, so our workforce, while we haven't taken on new members, has significantly aged. And they're really starting, our veteran volunteer fire service workforce is really starting to age out of service. They're moving into more of our administrative and fundraising roles, and that's causing us really a daily struggle. Retention of volunteers is really a societal issue. We're having trouble keeping the volunteers once we get them in because of work demands, people getting transferred with jobs, people moving out of the communities they grew up in. Folks aren't as stationary as they used to be, and that really causes us some retention issues. And we really appreciate the Commissioner's recent efforts over the last 2 years to really try to bolster our recruitment and retention efforts. The fire service has really become an all-hazards response agency. In the 60s and the 70s, you called the fire department if you smelled smoke or if something was on fire. But we've really become a jack of all trades. If you have an emergency in your community, the fire service is an agency that can deploy to your house rapidly and address just about any issue that you have. But with that increased responsibility come increasing training demands, hazardous materials response. The evolution of emergency medical services in our field has really caused a huge increase in the required training hours for our volunteers. We'll talk in a few minutes about the increased call volume across the county and what Carroll County looked like 30 years ago versus what it looks like today. in regards to our operational demand. And in addition to all of that, the volunteers have to do things such as fundraise and manage things around the station. In the 1980s, it was really unheard of for the volunteers to manage career employees. But in 13 of the 14 fire stations in the county, volunteers are now supervising, managing, and providing a human resources function over career employees that either serve at a part-time or a full-time basis. So that's something, if you talk to folks that have been around a while, would have been something they never would have imagined years ago. In addition to all those issues, that's driving a request for additional career staff support across many of our stations. The problem is, until we get organized and structured, we really don't want to keep piling on more career assets until we figure out what a uniformed combination service could be. And I'll use the word combination emergency services agency a lot today. Combination to us means a mix of volunteer and career members. So let's talk about Carroll County being a changing community. Back in 1998, the demand for services of our 14 fire departments was a total of 7,351 incidents. Fast forward to 2018, you can see that our calls for service rose to 19,653, which is a total increase of 167%. Now, it's very clear to see that the big driver in that call for service increase is emergency medical services. And that speaks a lot to the aging community that we serve. As folks age, they require medical assistance much more vigorously, and our demand for service from an EMS perspective has really skyrocketed. If you tie population growth into that, it really helps you see that the increase in population in the county, coupled with the increased demand for EMS services, really driving an increase in service demands of our fire departments. So these numbers have been updated since our last presentation, but let's talk about the current career support for the fire service. So in fiscal year 19, the county commissioners provided $5,754,000 and some change for career staff support to 13 of the 14 fire stations. That money goes to manage daily staffing numbers that account for 49 positions during the day, during the week, and 38 positions nights and weekends. And I'll try to limit how many numbers I throw out there. Currently, the Carroll County fire stations employ a total of 95 full-time and 254 part-time employees. The real struggle with that is there's 13 different employers. That accounts for 13 different rates of pay, 13 different benefit packages, 13 different policies and procedure manuals, and an inability to share personnel resources between the stations. A perfect example of that would have been last night at New Windsor. We had an employee who called out sick. If I wasn't able to find an employee that's employed by New Windsor to fill that vacancy, I can't tap into the resources of the other employees that are employed by the other fire stations. And that's tied to, obviously, insurance and workers' compensation laws. The majority of our fire stations, as you can see by the numbers provided, are staffed by a part-time workforce. That's folks that are either coming from another full-time job or folks that are waiting for an opportunity for a full-time position. And one of the struggles that all the fire departments in Maryland are facing is the well of employees running dry, especially amongst our advanced life support provider or paramedic realm. We have very few paramedics that are injected into our system every year. Conversely, Carroll County is typically used as a career stepping stone, as you've heard in other agencies, of folks that come in to get a job, to gain some experience, and then leave the county to go somewhere else. One thing that this program is looking to do is provide for the lack of a defined career progression ladder for our current employees, provide for competitive salaries, and really facilitate supervision, which doesn't necessarily exist on a 24/7 basis in the fire stations. The current employees in the fire stations are really asked to supervise themselves without any oversight or guidance. So, in February of 2017, at one of the quarterly meetings, the Carroll County Volunteer Emergency Services Association requested the then Board of County Commissioners to put together a work group. And the purpose of that work group was to look at the future organization of fire and rescue and emergency services in Carroll County to address current issues while maintaining and growing the volunteer system. And let me pause there for a second to say this is in no way intended to replace the current volunteer system. It's intended to stabilize it, allow it to grow, and support it with the staff needed to provide services to the citizens. We established 3 goals, and we've used those goals to really guide our efforts. The first goal was to identify Carroll County government's authority, role, and responsibility in the provision of fire rescue and emergency medical services in Carroll County. Building on that, we wanted to establish the leadership of a county-based combination fire rescue and emergency services system. And finally, the work group intends to create a more efficient service model for career fire rescue and EMS support to a combination fire service. This has been a very slow, strategic process to allow for a focused and direct conversation amongst all the stakeholders in the project. So, we're coming up on our birthday. It was February 9th, 2017 that the Board of County Commissioners established this joint work group of the members that I listed earlier. This is a CC Visa initiative, okay? So this is something that the volunteers are really asking for, and graciously the county's provided outstanding staff support from planning, public safety, and budget. And more recently, human resources has been built into the project. The work group was quickly able to identify that while Carroll County government is one of the primary funding sources for the 14 fire departments, at the time, there was no operational authority whatsoever for our Carroll County commissioners. So if one of our fire departments folded, if one of our fire departments operated outside of the bounds of current policy, the county commissioners really had no recourse to fix or alleviate any problems. So, in our commissioner form of government, that put the work group initially, charged the work group to initially create some enabling legislation. So the first 9 to 10 months of our work effort was strictly based on facilitating enabling legislation. That's what we brought to you last September. We championed that legislation to Annapolis, working with legislators, and were able to have successful passage of that bill last year. Since that time that legislation was passed, we have constructed a draft county code for emergency services, as well as a charter and bylaws for an emergency services advisory council. We'll get to what that council is for and what it's made up of a little bit later in the presentation. So in 2018, Senate Bill 542 was passed. It was actually a modification of existing legislation. The governor signed that legislation into law on April 24th, 2018, and it took effect on October 1st of 2018. And what that legislation does is really give you the ability to take action if you feel it's warranted. The volunteer service and the work group absolutely unequivocally feels that that action is warranted. The first paragraph, and I won't read it to you, is the enabling legislation itself. The second paragraph was something that was added in Annapolis to facilitate something that was discussed when we were here last September, and that is the requirement of the Emergency Services Advisory Council to give volunteer, career, and citizen stakeholders the ability to continue to have a hand in what happens in the service. If there's one thing that I would like the 5 of you to take away from today's discussion, it's this next statement, and that is the key to the successful creation of a combination service is the ability of the county's 14 volunteer corporations to maintain their individual corporate identity and autonomy as a community focal point, while at the same time ensuring accountability and consistency within a county-wide system. What does that mean? That means that the 14 individual fire departments aren't going anywhere. They're corporations under the state of Maryland. All of their membership and leadership are bought into the protection of the citizens and visitors of Carroll County, and they really have a stake in this game. Carroll County Fire Departments own all 14 of their fire stations. They own a mobile fleet that accounts to about $40 million of emergency response equipment. And something that's probably not spoken enough of in Carroll County, the fire stations in Carroll County are truly the community focal point. In the absence of businesses in our small towns, it's the fire stations that really allow the community to come together in both the emergency and non-emergency setting. So the next portion of this presentation really gets into the nuts and bolts about the draft county code that the work groups developed, what it's intended to do, and then we'll talk a little bit about the Emergency Services Advisory Council. So what does the draft county code do? Well, it really sets the foundation for everything moving forward. It establishes the rights, roles, and responsibilities of the volunteer fire service. So today, in any county government document, there is nothing that empowers the volunteer fire service to function. Through history, we just kind of accept that it happens, and that when a fire happens or an emergency happens, if someone's trapped somewhere, that the fire departments will respond and function. This actually codifies their function, their responsibility, and their authority. It guarantees that they'll operate within system-wide policies, procedures, and regulations, and it provides the rights for their organization, which allows them to operate under their articles of incorporation, be governed by officers, raise monies for their function, manage an internal budget, control the expenditure of their funds, and control the expenditures of county funds in accordance with established county policies, have the right to own property, and manage their own members, and if they would have non-operational employees. So the first part of the county code establishes the rights and the responsibilities of the volunteer corporation. The next thing the county code does is establish the Carroll County Department of Fire and Rescue Services. And what that's intended to be is an umbrella agency that both the career and the volunteer service operates under. It would be led by a single system-wide chief who would have ultimate authority provided by the Board of County Commissioners in the provision of that service. And while the sheriff's elected, it would be the equivalent of the head of their agency. So the sheriff oversees the sheriff's department. The fire chief or the chief would be appointed by the commissioners to oversee the fire service and really be the face of the agency.
Could it be an elected position?
It could be if you elect it to be so. I mean, if you deem that to be
Countywide election.
possible. That's not how it's currently written, but it's possible.
If you have one person that's over top of the 14 individual fire companies,
Mhm.
the way I'm reading this, but the 14 individual fire companies are separate entities and so forth, unless there's an MOU of understanding between him and, how is his authority, I mean, where does he get his authority from?
Who does the fire chief get his authority
Yeah.
from? He gets his authority through you, the five of you.
But the 14 individual companies, if they're separate entities, what's their, I don't know how, I don't know how to phrase the question, but it doesn't seem to me that they have to follow what he says.
So they do, if they want to participate in this service, a joint service for the county. So in these documents, it elaborates on the authority of the chief, which his or her authority is provided by you, and the responsibility of the operational lead for each volunteer corporation to enforce the rules and regulations of the county. So this isn't a new concept in the fire service. It happens all around us in the region, where individual corporation volunteer fire chiefs theoretically report to an overall system-wide chief. And based on the early construction of that system, it's very effective and happens every day around us, I guess is the best way to say it.
I would definitely look to take theoretically out of the equation.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
understand pragmatically which jurisdictions this actually is working, so we can use that as a template or something to use as precedence on this is how a fire chief has relations with the government along with the individual departments, because I have the same, question is how does that individual get the authority to drive decisions at the 14 separate companies?
Absolutely.
The second is, Commissioner Weaver, I do not believe that it would be up to us whether it would be an elected official or not. It would be more towards if we made a proposal and then had that, but, I mean, I think there's a lot more to it than
I'm just
whether it's
asking.
somebody be elected from our decision. I think it would be more of a county decision on, through a voting process. But I think it's an appointed
Correct.
position is what you're
Correct.
referring to here.
So if the commissioners elect through whatever process they want to change the draft code, across the nation, there are places where a fire chief or chief is elected.
Absolutely.
This is absolutely written so it's an appointee of this body. Really driving to be a director-level position within your cabinet so that they're an agent of you.
So I appreciate the questions. I'd like you to get through the presentation first, and then we'll
Yes,
go
sir.
with, I think that, because some of these questions I think will be answered in the presentation, but that's my only suggestion, then we'll go. And I know we've got public comment too, so I'd like to try to get that in between some of the conversation that we have as well. So,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
So the Chief of Fire Rescue Services for Carroll County, by the current draft county code, is requested to be a director-level position in county government, appointed and serve at the pleasure of the county commissioners, and really be the face of the fire service that represents and advocates for the service on a daily basis. So to speak of some of the struggles that exist today, and today specifically, 11 of our 14 volunteer fire chiefs work full-time outside of Carroll County. And there are issues before you every day that has a fire service tinge to it, whether it's future planning, whether it's budget, whether it's radio system issues. There's something that the current volunteer fire service needs represented at every day in this building, and quite frankly, our chiefs can't do it. Today, took leave from my full-time job to sit before you today, and that really becomes a struggle for us having uniformed representation to you. The chief would have overall responsibility and full authority for all operational units with the advice and cooperation of the Emergency Services Advisory Council. And most importantly, shall enforce the rules, regulations, and policies and procedures that are established for the county. That's really the accountability arm that we're looking to get to through this project. The draft county code establishes the Emergency Services Advisory Council. The whole way through our enabling legislation process, be it the member volunteer companies, when we sat before you as the county commissioners, and in Annapolis, there was great concern about stakeholder input to the future service in Carroll County. This Emergency Services Advisory Council allows that avenue to provide advice to the system chief. It's made up of stakeholders that include system utilizers, which are our citizenship, volunteer representatives from that would represent the 14 fire stations, representatives from our career workforce, and then management. This draft county code codifies key system issues to include minimum standards for fire rescue and EMS companies. What's the minimum standard for those companies to operate, and what level service do they need to provide to remain current? The mechanism to handle departments' failure to meet those minimum standards. So today, that's really thrust upon the Carroll County Volunteer Emergency Services Association. That's really something that needs to be held at a different level. The draft county code provides for a singular, unified chain of command. It takes compensation out of the picture and identifies how the entire puzzle fits underneath a single system-wide chief. It establishes or codifies the qualifications for operational officers. That's currently a policy-level discussion within CC Visa. And minimum response criteria to provide adequate service to the community. So the purpose of the ESAC is listed in your presentation, but most importantly, they're tasked with ensuring compliance with county code, fire, rescue, and EMS policies, endorsing the annual budget, and keeping you abreast of current fire, rescue, and EMS issues from the stakeholder perspective. So how do we bring all those people together, and who are they? And I think that's probably a very valuable conversation. It's a 15-member body with 11 voting members and 4 ex officio members. Those 6 volunteer representatives include 4 regional representatives from Carroll County Volunteer Fire Departments, the chairperson of the Fire Rescue Operations Committee, and the Fire Rescue Operations Committee is a consortium of the 14 fire chiefs in the county that currently make operational decisions in our existing system. The chairperson of the EMS Operations Committee, which is the same committee on the emergency medical side of the house. 2 career employee representatives, as they are significant stakeholders in our system and run the vast majority of our emergency medical calls on a daily basis. And 3 citizen representatives. And based on the success stories from the region, those citizen stakeholders are very, very important pieces of this puzzle. In an ex officio capacity, there would be hopefully a commissioner that's appointed to serve on that council as a representative to the greater body. The chief of the Department of Fire and Rescue Services, who we spoke about a few minutes ago. The jurisdictional medical director, who is a physician who gives our medical providers the authority to function and provide care in Carroll County. And the president of the Volunteer Emergency Services Association. Now, one of the more hearty conversations within our advisory committee meetings, or how do we break up the county to provide adequate representation without overloading the Emergency Services Advisory Council with too many people? So after much discussion, we found consensus in 4 regional representatives. Those consist of a central region, an east region, a south region, and a west region. So by fire station, Harney, Tawnytown, and Union Bridge, those 3 departments would come together to provide a regional representative. Pleasant Valley, Westminster, Reese, and New Windsor would come together to provide a central representative. Lyndeborough, Manchester, and Hampstead would come together to provide an eastern representative. And Mount Airy, Winfield, Gamber, and Sykesville would provide a southern representative. In addition to the county code, we have written a draft charter and bylaws for this Emergency Services Advisory Council to really define how they function and how they fit in to the overall picture. The charter and bylaws address appointment procedures, term limits, election of officers, quorums and voting, handling of procedural issues, and how to amend the bylaws. We really looked at the Emergency Services Advisory Council as your body, similar to the Planning Commission, the Liquor Board, as a stakeholder board to provide you input and feedback. So what did we do with all these documents and how did we come together? One of the groups that I really didn't spend enough time talking about in the early portion of our presentation was an advisory committee. We came away from your presentation September of 2017 with the charge, get together members of the 14 fire departments to make sure that the work group is staying on target with what the 14 fire departments really envision this future being. So immediately following that meeting with the commissioners in September of 17, we formed an advisory committee, and I know there's a lot of terms for a lot of different groups, but that's a 28-person committee made up of 2 representatives from each of the fire departments. That advisory committee has vetted every issue that the work group has brought forward and has really allowed us to garner consensus amongst the volunteer fire departments. So these 3 documents were drafted by the work group and advisory committee. They were reviewed. Is legal sufficiency the appropriate word?
That's right.
For legal sufficiency by our county attorney's office, with the recognition that prior to them becoming officially made into a structured county code, they'll be needed to be reviewed again and sent to public hearing. These documents are in line with the findings of the Carroll County's Long-Term Advisory Committee, who you recently heard from, and our goals and initiatives have been in lockstep with that group's work moving forward, especially the Public Safety Subcommittee. And this is something I can't really speak enough about. This is endorsed by the Carroll County Volunteer Emergency Services Association. At our final vote, we had 13 departments in favor, with 1 department voting not in favor of this initiative. So 13-1 within that body is a huge accomplishment of getting consensus amongst the group. So that's really what we've accomplished up to today. So let's talk about what we're doing tomorrow and moving forward. Our next real workload is working with human resources of Carroll County government, refining job descriptions of positions and then classifying those positions within a pay scale. We're aware of what the current employees that I listed before that work in the fire stations make. It's safe to say that they're a little bit all over the place, and we need to unify that into a single pay structure for the county. The working with human resources and the classification of those positions is going to allow us to help cost out the system, which I assure is something that this body's absolutely interested in. We're refining a plan for phased implementation across fiscal year 20, 21, and 22. That does include what will be before you as a fiscal year 20 request for mid-year funding of a chief and administrative assistant. One thing that the work group and advisory committee really feel strongly about is this needs to be constructed in a top-down fashion, in that we need to get the leadership on board to establish policies and procedures prior to, encumbering the employees. And if you look that it's taken us 2 years to get to this point, and we're looking at a phased implementation, hopefully over 3 years, if we have concurrence from this body, we're right where the commissioners thought we would be in September of 2017 when they said it's going to take us about 5 years to get there. And you're right, it's going to take us about 5 years to get there from when we started. I mentioned earlier, but we're working really hard with the budget office, with human resources, to work out costing the system. And I think this last part will be most delightful to you. We're working on mechanisms to fund the system, right? So we know that today the system's going to cost more than what you currently provide, that $5.7 million that I spoke of earlier today. One of the things we're spending a lot of time on is looking at cost reductions due to consolidation. There's a lot of economy and scale in this. When you look at insurance and lots of things that the fire departments buy, there can be significant cost reductions that would result in savings to allow us to have some money placed towards staffing. The fire departments are on board with revenue sharing through consolidated EMS billing. So today, if we talk about EMS billing, we have 13 different billing rates that are all billed independently by the volunteer fire stations through a third-party biller. If we bring that together under one umbrella, that allows us to do a lot of things to increase efficiency. That involves negotiating a better contract price with a third-party biller, improving quality assurance to improve income return, and more return based on the fact that our reports would be monitored by a quality assurance office. So we think there's a lot of things that we can do to help fund the system without just coming and begging for money, which is probably important for you to hear. So what are we asking? We're asking that the commissioners concur with the proposed draft addition to the county code, as well as the Emergency Service Advisory Council's charter and bylaw, and move them towards adoption, understanding that that's a process. And now, discussion.
So before we do that, we kind of went out of whack here a little bit. I'd like to hear from some of the folks that have come here today. So there's going to be questions, and I know that there may be questions as a result of some of the comments that we hear as well. So let's go to the public comment portion, and then we'll get to the discussion part, because I know there's quite a few questions.
I'm sorry, was I messing you up?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Get a flag thrown on you.
Yeah, 10 yards.
Dan Plumper?
Good morning. My name is Dan Plunkert. I represent the Westminster Fire Department. A little surprised to be last year and go first. The reason I'm here, I was asked by Tom, we were the company, Westminster was the company that voted against these documents. And I want to provide explanation of why we did that. And that lies in the concern, our concern lies in the representation phase of these documents. We've always maintained the importance of have a seat at the table. It's been a topic during all of our discussions when this was presented to you initially, that we were here speaking on that concern at that time. We don't feel that this current plan provides that opportunity. There was initially only 3 representatives representing the 14 departments, and that was changed. There were some models presented, and it was changed to 4. We're not a one-size-fits-all department. As internal stakeholders, we own, as was presented earlier, we own the equipment and facilities. And we just feel that there's one person representing 4 departments. It's too much of a span of control. We don't feel that we'll have that say at the table. It was mentioned earlier, we have concerns about government administering private entities. And it kind of goes back to that. If we only have one person and that person is not from any given department, how are we going to truly be represented at those meetings? We've been involved with this through the whole process. We're often criticized for our opinions. We strongly agree that change needs to happen. Our department has probably been one of the loudest over the years in speaking on the fact that we need more personnel and we need more funding to make that happen. So without a doubt, we're not against something has to be done. We just have concerns, and we feel it's better to get this stuff right now than to find out later that it's wrong, and we feel it's going to be harder to come back later and correct it. At Westminster, it's a little known fact, we've had paid staff since the early 1920s. So we have a lot of things in place. We have our own HR person. We have our own Q&A person that's doing EMS reports. There's a lot of things that we've already experienced and we've already taken care of. We're not perfect. There's always room for improvement, but we already have that stuff in place. So we want to make sure that our voice is heard, and I hope that provides a reason why we voted against this proposal, or at least these documents. And we hope you consider that when we evaluate this plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Next is Rick Baker.
Good morning. I want to
Morning,
paraphrase a comment that Commissioner Boucher made about charter government, where you talked about the county government is a multi-million-dollar business being run by part-time people. We can say the same thing about the fire service in Carroll County. You know, we're a multi-million-dollar business being run by volunteers. And those volunteers are, like what Chief Code mentioned earlier, are taking care of all the payroll, human resources, budgets, shift schedules, those things that a lot of our volunteers are very talented in doing things, but some of them, they're not as talented as doing HR things and taking care of those type of issues. We've got to get back into the business of being what the volunteers are really good at doing, and that's running calls, raising monies, and being part of the community, and being good partners of a combination department. A lot of people like to equate how we're operating now. We call ourselves a combination department. I don't really quite buy that yet because we don't really have a central command. But what we do know is that we have been able to function in those environments, and I think we can continue to function in those environments, and we've seen the errors that other jurisdictions around us have done in the past. I also am very concerned about the people who are working for us right now. They have no career progression. They come to work, they could ride a medic unit or drive a fire truck, and they could be doing the same thing for 30 years. There's nowhere upward mobility for them to go to. And that's why we're seeing lots of people that are leaving our current system today and going elsewhere, because they would have a career in those system. This program will benefit both through the career personnel that we currently have, as well as the volunteers that we currently have serving. And I, again, reiterate that it'll get the volunteers back to doing what they do well, and that's raising money, running calls, training, and providing the service that they do. Let us get out of the administrative part of this. Let us get out of the hiring, the firing, the payroll, the HR business. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Rick.
Next is Michael Carolingo. Did I get that right? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Michael Karolenko. I'm a career firefighter EMT here in the county. I'm also an executive board member of Local 5184, the International Association of Firefighters, which is the Carroll County Professional Firefighters and Paramedics. I just want to get up here and really take an opportunity to reinforce our position and our endorsement for this all moving forward, and kind of the stance and the good faith measures that CC Visa and the people involved up to this point have really taken to move forward. We really take a lot of pride in what we do here in the county as career staff. You know, we've been given kind of a, I hate to like act in some critical manner, but maybe a lackluster hand in kind of the resources and the way that us as career staff have to operate, especially in comparison to the departments that are around us. Since 2005, I've gotten to experience this county from the volunteer capacity and also from the career capacity. And in that time, I was able to fill some other positions and other jobs, but also work in other counties in a volunteer EMS capacity, excuse me, as a career EMS capacity. The fire service is a small world. And in that small world, we've had a great opportunity to have a lot of input and conversation with guys from other departments and all of our neighbors around us. And we have an opportunity here to look at the successes and failures of those departments and be able to bring that into Carroll County and create a system that's pertinent, it's productive, it's sustainable, and effective for us to be able to move forward and really look to the future of how we're going to sustain and put fire engines and medic units on the street in an effective manner to provide services for the citizens here and the businesses here in Carroll County. You know, as Danny said, it's over 92 years of career staffing in Carroll County. We've kind of stayed on the back burner, and us as a local, we're trying to work forward to advocate and to be a productive part of this conversation, to be someone who the volunteers, the commissioners, the citizenry recognize and bring into conversations, and we want to continue being a productive part of that conversation. We really appreciate everything you guys have done for us so far, having conversations and opening your doors, and also CC Visa for the amount that they've worked with us up to this point. We want to continue that positive relationship and all that positive momentum moving forward to really create a sustainable and effective system for Carroll County. Having family, having friends, having businesses, and even our careers here, we want to see a positive thing happen. We're seeing the beginning of that, and we really have, it has our endorsement moving forward, and we want to continue to be an active part of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the last one is Max Nicky.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Max Nicky. I'm president of Local 5184 here. I just want to say on behalf of the career members in Carroll County that we are endorsing these documents that are being presented today. I want to thank CC Visa, the work group, and everybody that's worked so hard to get to this point. Kind of to echo what Tom and Mike have said, you know, we need to make a change, and that's the hardest thing to decide. And we've gotten to this point so far, and to even be able to stand here and have them present it to you is, you know, to get 13 of the 14 to agree to one point is a minor miracle, to be honest, from what I've seen in my 7 years in the fire service. Like Mike, I did start out for a brief time as a volunteer at Pleasant Valley. I am now a career firefighter paramedic. Like I said, you know, we're, as a career staff, we are endorsing these documents. We do want to see a sustainable and efficient, you know, fire service in the future. You know, I have friends and family. I live right over by the hospital. So, you know, this is all important to me. This is my community that we want to help protect. And we look forward to working with you guys and hoping to see this move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Max. Okay, you know, all of us identify the fact that this is a huge change in the way in which things will occur here as we move forward in Carroll. With that being said, is there anyone else that would like to speak at this time? I'll veer off from the official, got to fill out the card. I'll ask if you do, come up to the mic at this point, and then after you speak, fill out the card. Dennis. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Dennis Beard, past president of Sykesville Volunteer Fire Department, which then became the Sykesville Freedom District Fire Department. And this is a big day. I approached the county commissioners in 1979 about this issue. 1979. And the vote back then was 1 for, 13 against. And I was tickled pink when I was asked to serve on the work group. And when we started, we knew a lot of work needed to be done, and I think it has been done. I am a 30-year retired career. I started my volunteer in 1964, but I worked in a combination system, not too far from here. And matter of fact, that county is getting ready to celebrate their 50th anniversary of a combination system, and it's working very well. And I just cannot understand, if it's working there, why it can't work here in Carroll. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis. Anybody else? I've worked side by side with many of you over the years, and I can't believe you're all sitting. So here's your opportunity. Anybody else? I guess you'll call me later. So now's the opportunity for us to have the questions, and I know there's probably a few of those. Knowing that today we're in the briefing mode here today, and with just want to point out that Tom and I had a conversation about this, and he's aware that too. Today won't be a decision at this point. We have a lot to digest here. So now's a good time to air out some of the challenges, concerns that you guys have. So let's roll with the discussion part of it.
I'd like to thank Mr. Coe for the presentation you gave us. It was very informative. Also, express my appreciation for the emergency services people understanding the importance of having a chief executive officer oversee your operation in the potential future. That's very pleasing to me. And unifying all these departments together will be a great progress to getting this straightened out.
Going up the line, I guess I have one question. You have 13 departments says yes, one says no. If we go forward with this, they just continue to operate as a separate volunteer fire department?
No, the key to this system is that it is a singular system. We had some pretty good conversation back in September of 17 about how it might be really challenging to ever get a completely unanimous vote. That's something that this body is challenged with every time they take a vote, right? So we try to work very hard to get consensus, to take everybody's input and try to put the best product forward to you that will really serve the citizens the best. So that doesn't mean that we don't listen to the concerns, but it's really hard to deny that 13-1 is a pretty strong voice from your volunteer workforce.
That is, but I guess I have concern here. You know, you're asking for somebody to oversee, and once government gets involved, you realize things aren't going to be the same, and government will change items. If you go into this, and here again, back to my question, can that one operate separately and not?
No.
No, can't
it
be
cannot.
part of that.
Cannot and should not. So one of the things that the work group and the advisory committee really did is, one of the things Carroll County is really fortunate about is we have a vast amount of experience in our county. We have a lot of really smart, knowledgeable folks that have tenure in organizations outside of Carroll County. So they bring that back home with them and really kind of try to grab the success stories from the rest of the world and bring it here to make it right. So one of the things the work group and the advisory committee really did was try to see how other like systems were built, what the chronology was in that construction, and how did the organizational structure work. Because from the outside, the thought of a singular system-wide chief on top of 14 volunteer organizations seems like a crazy organizational nightmare. It is really a smooth-running machine, not very distant to Carroll. I live it every day in my other life. So to say that it's not obtainable would not be accurate. Will it take work and maintenance and communication and consensus and all of those important leadership skills? Absolutely it will. It can be done in this county very easily.
Well, let me get down to, I guess, the major part here. What is it going to cost? And
So
we need to have numbers on what's it gonna cost. And we know, I mean, I appreciate what everybody does here, and I've talked to many of you in the audience here. What is the cost to the county for, you know, director and whatever else is gonna be needed? What is going to be the cost then on an ongoing basis? And what is your solution to pay for it?
Yep, understood. So,
And that, I mean, we have to look at numbers.
absolutely.
And that's what we're about.
So the success of this process moving forward over the last 2 years was don't look too far down the road. Because if you look too far down the road, you get distracted by details that don't currently exist in that conversation. I can give you a price. You know, we could dream up a price, but until some of these structural items are designed and we know how we're building the system, I can't give you an accurate price. So we've always focused on the next goal. You know, we've got to get these documents approved and put in place so that we can bring other members of the team in to start to work that. The decision of how we staff the fire stations from a part-time versus full-time basis is a huge conversation that drives cost, right? Benefits packages, retirement packages, all of that. So until we understand the construction of the leadership and how the organizations tie together, I can't give you a to-the-penny price. I can tell you spend $5.7 million today, and that doesn't cover all the expenses. We have departments that take 100% of their EMS billing money in addition to their fundraising dollars to pay people that are in their fire stations today. That means that people are flipping hamburgers to pay for someone to staff their fire engine. There's not another agency in county government that does that. So I can give you a price, but until we get farther down the road, it's not going to be an accurate price. What I can tell you is we recognize that conversation. We're looking at every measure possible to lessen the burden on the taxpayer through consolidation of efforts, economies of scale and insurance and other items. And most importantly, that consolidated EMS billing conversation is huge, right? So it's what helps keep our departments afloat today and the compensation of our career employees that the county doesn't cover. So I recognize that as an absolute question. We're not going to be at a good place to give you a hard dollars and cents answer until we understand where the commissioners stand on some of these documents.
You understand some of that will probably come out of CC Visa funds to start, I would think, at this point. Or is people aware that that may reduce?
So I think
part of that?
when you say CC Visa funds, to
What we
clarify
get-
what I understand you to say, there will be repositioning of money that's currently sent to CC Visa towards the construction of this department.
I don't know.
Well, I'm telling you, I recognize that that's a reality, right? That's how you achieve some of those economies of scale. But we haven't dug into we focused on these to get these before you to lay the foundation so we can build the first floor, right? So definitely a priority conversation for us, but it very much becomes a chicken and the egg conversation of how do I get you dollars when I don't understand how we're going to construct the system.
And, you know, we have a lot of volunteers out there that do a lot of good things, and they are community centers.
Yes, sir.
Whatever we do, that has to be maintained in this county. I have a great deal of respect for all the events that happen at these fire departments, and they are part of the community. In fact, focus of the community in many aspects. I'm worried about the loss of that somewhat in this too. And
So-
you said 3 years, but it may take longer to roll this out, and that's due to cost. Can it be 5 from this point on, or is that
So the only thing I
unrealistic?
can say is we've got departments that are struggling today. And our fire departments function very heavily on shift work employees and retired folks. 5 years from now, those retired folks are that 5 years older, right? So our departments are really starting to struggle in certain aspects of staffing. And if we just continue to kick that can down the road, this doesn't even address increasing staffing. This is just the consolidation of the current staffing. So recognizing the burden on the taxpayer is that we've got to advocate for service delivery and unification of the service. So everything you said has been on point and exactly what we want to provide you. We need a little feedback from your body to understand how we cost this out. The first step, our fiscal year 20 proposal, and I don't want to get into dollars and cents because I don't think that's the intent of today to talk about fiscal year 20's budget request. In the grand scheme of county dollars is very, very small, very small. But it's important to get that leadership team together and in to start to build those policies, procedures, and processes to build it from the top down.
A few thoughts. Just as I share with you, stay away from theoretical. I'm also concerned about the cost and the resources that it will take. And I believe that you're looking at things tactically with some of the issues we have today that must be fixed. The concern is don't put the Band-Aid on a gushing wound, and you need to have that strategic vision. So I think, in fairness with what Commissioner Weaver is asking, and me as well, is I understand you want to build the first floor, build the foundation, the first floor, but you got to have the vision for the house, and you know what the cost of the house is going to be. It's not going to be a direct dollars and cents. It's going to be, this course of action will cost this much in resources. This course of action will cost X, in resources. So you have templates, as you shared, and precedences, as was shared from other communities and other jurisdictions, on costs. When I say cost, it's resources, time, people, and money that need to be applied to get into the solution you want to get to. So I think doing that homework, as I know you've done, is packaging it. You did a great job in packaging the briefing today, and I appreciate that as well. Huge advocate in moving forward for all the right reasons. You've identified the values, and I've heard that from those that testified today and also from the community, the values of the services you provide. You're prioritizing the work towards them and again trying to figure out how to get more volunteers and the concerns about getting volunteers. And now you're looking at how to resource those priorities. And you're coming here. So I do appreciate that. Change is tough. Change can be very difficult. And sometimes change can be more difficult when emotions are engaged and involved. And again, I just want to share with you again my appreciation from you and the others talking about more objective looks at how to make those changes. So you're looking from the outside as well, coming in, and getting best practices. I think it's going to be important to capture those best practices and really package them in allowing us to make a more informed decision. I think we're all inclined in moving forward because you're sharing where the issues are, but getting us to that next point is really the packaging about it. So really good job, and I appreciate, again, the services just from my perspective of being in service for a long time, the services you provide to our community. So thanks.
Thank you.
I have a few questions about the document itself.
Yes, sir.
Going here. And I'm looking at this. I don't know how this correlates to what you have in front of you, but I'm looking at the protection of life and property. It says it's effective distribution of personnel and apparatus. Does that mean just equipment and people? Does that mean you're looking at opening another fire station if possible or closing ones that aren't needed? Does it include all that? Or?
So the document's really written for the future. Mm-hmm. Today, the volunteer corporations own what I would say to be 98% of the entire rolling stock in the county. The system chief would not really be able to come in and move an asset or change an asset that he or she doesn't own. However, moving forward, as the county grows, long after I'm out of the service and gone, it's possible that the county might have fire stations, they might own apparatus, and they might need to move that around. I don't see that in the short term, but we wrote the document towards the future.
So right now, that really doesn't mean anything then?
So it means that they can't move assets that they don't own.
Because that goes back to my question about the authority.
Mm-hmm.
What authority do they actually have?
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the question about the pay, because you said they're paid different at different fire stations
Yes, sir.
and so forth, which I understand that. So will the person in charge have the authority to make the pay standard across the board?
Yeah, so the vision is that these all become county employees eventually under a county HR policy, a county pay scale.
All right, but for right now, let's say when this goes into effect,
Mhm.
that the person in charge have the ability to standardize that pay?
No, sir, they would not. So that person would come in, and probably for the first months, 6 months or a year of their employment, they would really be buried in this building, writing the policies, providing the structure, working with human resources to, finalize job descriptions that we have drafted out. Really come up with the vision of how they manage their department. Write RFPs for contracts for EMS billing, all of those sort of things. They really won't get into personnel management till year 2, the very final
Okay,
leg.
in year 2, do they have that ability?
Absolutely, because they become county employees.
Who becomes county employees?
The current career operational employees of the volunteer departments.
Okay, on your composition of your advisory committee, it says 6 volunteer representatives of the 14 Carroll County volunteer companies. How do you determine who those 6 are?
So the way that's written or designed, the 3 or 4 departments, depending on the region, would recommend someone from that region. So we'll take Westminster, Pleasant Valley, Reese, and New
Well,
Windsor.
before you get there.
Yes, sir.
How'd you come up with the regions? Because I'm looking at the regions, I'm
Mhm.
thinking you come up just because that's where located on the map, or number of calls, number of people served, how many volunteers they
Yep.
have. How is that determined?
Regional complements. So if you look at the departments that run together, that are very familiar with each other, that know each other's apparatus and really know their issues, those stations complement each other. And I'll use the central region to speak of because that's where I'm from, right? So New Windsor, Reese, Pleasant Valley, and Westminster run together on structure fires more than any group within the county, geographically, right? So we're familiar with their personnel. I know their officers personally. We talk back and forth all the time. That complements communication outside of the operational scene to be able to represent them in a meeting setting. What Danny Plunkett said in his discussion about Westminster's opposition is absolutely accurate to what he voiced within the advisory committee. When we initially came forward, there were only 3 volunteer reps, and it was 3 volunteer reps, 2 career reps, and 3 citizen reps to try to keep it to a manageable group. You can imagine 15 people around a table, 11 of which have voting power, could really make a meeting pretty complicated. So trying to bring that span of control down, we talked everything from 3 representatives all the way up to 6. And the consensus of that group narrowed it down to 4 or 5. And once we narrowed it down, 4 was what won out amongst all the member departments.
Was the consensus 13-1, or was consensus just majority on that
So,
particular issue?
on that particular issue, it was a supermajority, but I don't remember exactly what it was. It was better than, 3/4, but it wasn't half. And it really just becomes a discussion of how many people can you have around the table to have a functional conversation. Really wasn't intended to cut anybody out.
You know, in the last 4 years, when got elected to this position, we've come a long way. And I think you said 1979 you started on this and hitting brick walls. Today, this is refreshing to hear, where we are. I have a lot of questions on it because we have to pay for this.
Absolutely, sir.
However, we've come a long way, and I give you guys a lot of credit. The people in this room will be making major decisions here and what we're going to be doing in the future, and I understand the importance of this and how we deal with it. I understand the paid personnel want to come in, the career ladder needs to be put into place. I understand that we want to keep the volunteers. I commend you guys for all the work you've done and put together. Even though you catch me here and there, the grocery store, wherever, and I get comments from it, I appreciate those because we have to do something, and I understand that.
If I could, and I don't want to overstep my bounds.
Well,
I'm sorry, sir.
I'd like to
couple more.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Questions over here. That's all right. On your part, which is Director in Chief of Fire Rescue Services, and the Part B says, well, overall responsibility and full authority. That doesn't come into effect until everyone's county employee.
I think that's going to be a gradual implementation of their authority.
Okay. Give me a second here.
Yes, sir.
He has to speak up faster over there, I guess.
Well, while he's looking, I will point out that this is why we're not making this decision
Right.
today, because as we go down
Right.
through here, all of us have questions
Yeah.
on the documents that have been provided
This is
to us.
2 years of work. I couldn't
Right, so
imagine
this
you
is in no
digest
way
it in
any-
50 minutes.
No.
This is not a delayed response today, okay?
Your,
See what
Received.
I did there?
Received.
on your, actually, this response time is my next question. It says minimum response time criteria, you're going to meet establish, who's going to set that criteria? Is that a national establishment statewide, or you guys
So
going
you
to set
can,
that yourself?
you effectively, what I vision and the work group visions, there's a few things in the county code that recognize policy, right? So we want to codify something to recognize its importance and its enforceability, but we don't want to have to come back before you to change county code every time something needs updated because of best practices in the industry. So when you talk about things like response standards, when you talk about things like officer standards, when you talk about some of those things in that document, it references a policy. That policy would come through the Emergency Services Advisory Council, where the stakeholders have the ability to voice their concerns, and then it's the chief's job to enforce it.
And if we're not meeting the minimum response times that are put down in here, what happens?
So that, again, is codified but referenced in a policy document. The chief would have to enforce that. And that's the perennial question when you talk about people that fail to meet things. It can be anything depending on the problem. It could be a financial penalty of no receipt of money. It could be that their emergency responses are backed up by the next closest department if they're viewed as ineffective. But it's important that those references are made in the code so that it's something that county government can stand behind. So it's made to meet the offense, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
And next section is a significant number of operational volunteer members necessary to meet. Who determines significant number?
Could you help me out with the
Fire,
page?
rescue, EMS company, special operations teams, minimum standards.
Yeah, so I
Number
think
8.
if you go down a couple bullets, and I apologize, I wasn't ready to go to that exact page, it actually specifies a number of people.
You know, it says to have 20 active members, 10 of which meet your seat.
Correct.
Whatever minimum, that's yours,
Mhm.
and so it's already in there.
Yes, sir.
Okay, then my next question is, what if you don't have that number? What happens then? What if you don't have that number of people?
Yeah, so
For
that,
whatever reason, but you don't have
that
that
really
number.
becomes a specific conversation. Is that we have to add career staffing at that station? Is it that station needs to be backed up in their dispatch to response? There's a couple different things that the county, if you will, could invoke to support that department if they don't meet the standard. It is not currently a menu, but there's lots of options they have to fix that.
So we just work with it to
Yes,
try to
sir,
raise the number.
to
Okay.
address it.
And
That would be an issue that they would bring before you as saying, this department currently doesn't meet the county's minimum standards. This is my plan. The commissioners would say, that's reasonable. And that's happened across the state of Maryland in recent past, if you've seen that in the news.
Okay, in that same section, it talks about the House County employee at the, what it actually talk about is the firehouses themselves
Mhm.
and what they're required to have. Do we have that in all the firehouses now?
Yeah, so everything that's in here, where current career staff are, it does exist.
Okay.
Now, you made mention earlier, which is absolutely appropriate and directly on target. Our vision is that the chief would establish a memorandum of understanding with each department that covers the roles and responsibilities of housing those career personnel. And that's something we had brought a chief in from a neighboring jurisdiction to speak to the entire association about the effectiveness of that communication and how important it is on the early end, those first 6 months or a year, to really establish those memorandums and have a general understanding of expectations. So that's definitely in kind of our wheelhouse of cranking out ahead of time.
On your presentation, you talked about revenue sharing through consolidated EMS billing.
Yes, sir.
What do you mean by revenue sharing?
So
'Cause
today,
you talked about, I don't know, I'm sorry, but you did talk about standardizing what you're going to be
Mhm.
charging for EMS billing, which makes sense.
yes, sir.
But does that mean it's a central location that does the standardized charging, but then if my company runs 80 calls, I'm just throwing out 80 calls, I get the reimbursement for those 80 calls? Or does that, I run 80 calls and it just goes all around the county?
The advisory committee has spoke in depth about EMS billing and how we can use that advantageously to help assist this project, because that's really what it assists today in the 13 departments that have employees. The intent is that we would have a centralized billing function. Underneath the chief, there'd be an office where the billing function would happen either in-county, in-house, or through a third-party vendor. We've talked about formulas, we've talked about percentages, and what we've really landed at is a fixed percentage share of EMS billing that would allow the departments enough money to maintain their capital EMS assets like ambulances and cardiac monitors, but provide the county the sufficient return of funds for their employee investment and the operational disposable expenses that we use on the ambulance that come through the budget.
Because what I've heard is that departments are, or at least one department is concerned of running a number of calls that they're billing off
Yes,
for
sir.
right now, and then that money comes back to them.
So what?
The concern is not for standardized billing, which I think is a great idea,
Mhm.
but the concern is I run 800 calls, but in reality I only get paid for half of them because money goes around to the rest of the county.
Yes, sir.
Is that
So what we,
possible, or-
where the advisory committee has landed on that is of the 14 departments that are represented, 13 bill, because one doesn't have an ambulance. All 13 are in favor of sharing EMS billing income. What we haven't landed on is the percentage of what is the right mix. We've narrowed that window, but we haven't really nailed that exact percentage. We've tried formulas, calculating out formulas, and we think that the formulas that we've designed inappropriately affect either slow companies or busy companies disproportionately. So we're really looking at a percentage share. So if company X has $1 million in EMS billing income, a certain percentage of that would stay with the company to fund specific things like replacement ambulances, cardiac monitors, those sort of things, facility upgrades for the employees that exist there, and then the county would receive the remainder of that percentage to go towards this project. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it
Okay.
does. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
That's all I have right now.
Yes, sir.
A concern,
I'm available anytime.
Thank you.
a concern of mine is that we do not overregulate.
Yes,
That
sir.
we do not put layers on top of layers, and I think that was shared as well. So if there are regulatory guidelines that are directing response times, that those are used, and we should reference those best practices, and just that is beyond establishing regulatory guidelines or laws, best practices should also be focused
Absolutely.
on, and that's, and you shared that as well. I like this regional approach. Response times, I oversaw fire department on the installation on Fort Meade. 80% of their calls were outside the fence line, integrated with the department right there, and it worked very well. And I would go on those calls with them once in a while to learn how they're doing it. And it all had to do with partnership, understanding the relationships like you shared as well. So this to me is all positive best practices being used that you're trying to bring together. So again, I appreciate that. I just am concerned about putting regulations on top of regulations. We do not want to overburden ourselves with additional regulations.
Absolutely, because the whole focus of this is to release the burden from the volunteers so they can focus, as Ricky Baker said, on what they do well.
Good.
See that? Just that quick it went. Can't remember.
I've known you a few years, so
Yeah.
I'm not shocked.
So, if I can, and again, I hope I'm not overstepping my bounds, Carroll County's in a really unique position. As you go to Mako and get your way around the state, I'm sure you understand and have had conversations that there's several folks in your position across the state that are dealing with the same issue. Carroll County's different, and a lot of people are watching Carroll County. And that's because the volunteers have come forward to the government to say there's an issue that we need to address. We want to address it in a partnership, and county governments embrace that, providing staff support to bring this forward to you. We have a real opportunity here to make an effective change before we hit a crisis that someone's going to need to make a rash decision. We can plan this and make this happen appropriately and build a really fantastic, efficient public safety model for our citizens. And we and I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to put this before you, and we really look forward to working with you and moving this forward. We will absolutely, Commissioner Weaver, be able to come up with relative cost figures for you and we will provide that to you, understanding that they're generic budget numbers that are flexible based on the decisions that this body makes.
I'd like to follow up on Commissioner Rothstein's mention of regulation. Along with regulations, my constituents are concerned about potential taxation. Has your organization discussed any potential taxation ideas that you have? Is that something that you want to bring to us? Because we need to consider this as far as financing. What is this going to cost as far as mechanisms?
So the neat thing, Commissioner, is we're pretty good at putting out fires and taking sick people to the hospital. I'm not really good at taxing people.
Neither are we. We hear a lot. But our constituents are concerned about this.
Well, it's a high priority for us, which is why we're trying to look at means to save money as a group, as a means to share current revenue streams to make this work. I've said from the beginning for the 3 incumbent commissioners, this isn't ever going to be cheaper than the way we do business today. It's going to be more efficient. It's going to be better for the citizens. It's going to be better for the volunteers and the employees, but it's not going to be cheaper. We're trying to build a very frugal system that's effective. I guess that's really a directive we need from this body if you want us to look into those avenues. We've really concentrated on how the fire service functions, bring that to you, and then let you make decisions. We've looked at internal costs and internal revenue streams that we can redirect, but we really haven't talked about taxation and how we raise those funds, because quite frankly, we felt that it was kind of outside of our bounds. So if that's something that you'd like us to look at, we wouldn't shy away from looking at that.
I think it needs to be out on the table, because I have constituents that say we consolidate the fire department, raise their taxes. So it needs to be part of the discussion. If you guys research or see what our jurisdictions are doing, I'd like to see what could potentially happen to us.
I think if I brought in comparison numbers for jurisdictions similar to Carroll, you would be amazed at the current cost savings that you have. That there's very few counties can do what we do with what you graciously have given us. So I think that's best a joint conversation if you provide us with a charge of what you'd like us to do.
Thank you.
Sir? Anything else?
I just like to say, I think this is a positive step forward. We need to look at this. We need to move. A lot of the ideas in here I agree with 100%. There's some, of course, I've asked questions about, and we'll get more information, but I think it's a good step forward. I really do.
And whatever we can do to provide you information while you deliberate this, you'll get an email from me tonight. So my contact information will be in there.
All right.
But we really thank you for the support. We look forward to moving forward, working with you, and we can really make this positively Carroll. See what I did there?
I see what you did, but we're changing that just for the record. So
I was in the hall.
A little late, $1 short. So I'll wrap it up, and everything that I say has already been said by me. It's an interesting segue that you give about the MACO representation. Just yesterday, I had 3 different individuals from Cecil, Harford, and Washington County come up to me at 3 different times and said to me, "So, hey, Steve, what's going on?" And the discussion was as a result of a bill that's being introduced, another one of the tax subtraction bills that allows for more of us to take more off of our taxes to see that savings when, this lovely time of year. And a lot of the jurisdictions are against that for obvious reasons, because it's tough for us to make up those tax subtractions. So, but that discussion led to another discussion of, where are we? And it's interesting, I turned around and talked to County Executive Gardner from Frederick County, your boss.
I'm familiar.
And asked her to lead a little bit more of the discussion as all of us around the table were talking about it. So I think in the near future, we're going to see MACO take it up too, because we're not the only county that is challenged with the direction here. I will tell you that I've been involved for 44 years now in this business in Carroll, and I think I've probably served in pretty much every leadership role that there is or has ever been created. I am extremely happy that you have reached the point that you have with the amount of the decisions that you have and the 13-to-1 vote that you have. But I will tell you that I would hope, because this is such a change and such a challenge moving forward, that for me, I would love to see that 14-0.
Us as well.
Because we're all in this together. So I'm hoping as we move forward with this, and we will, that we can make those tweaks or changes or what have you so that we are all at the table. Because we're not going to be able to do this if we're not. So that's just from me. And I get the questions about what it's going to cost. Listen, you know, as I put on different hats every 10 minutes of a day, I get those questions. And we don't want to put the cart or the hose cart before the horse here. See what I did there?
I saw that.
But yet this situation might be something that's how we're going to have to do this, because as we develop this, we're going to have to do things that we don't necessarily do. You know, up here we usually get, okay, well, we need to do this, and this is what it's going to cost. Well, in this instance, we're not necessarily there. But for me, and I've said this to a lot of you in the room, the first step for me is, I think, getting that person, whoever it is, and I don't know what you want to call them. I'm not necessarily loving the fire chief title.
We took the fire off. It's just chief.
I get the chief thing, but I don't know that I'm still enamored by that title, but we can talk about that. But getting that person in place, then those questions that we have, that many of us have, we can start to answer as we develop this the structure that we want to see here. So, and listen, we have, Dennis, you brought it up. There's been counties right next to us that have done this, and have they done it right? I don't know.
Everybody's done a portion of it right. We took all the right portions.
Right. So I think we are in a good place here to be sort of the leader as we move forward when we are talking to the Cecils and the Harfords of the world, and they'll watch us and see how we do this. So
They really are.
So, and it was not my intent here to not make a decision today, but I do think that we need to absorb this a little bit, because there are going to be more questions, and quite frankly, I love to see the room filled up with fire and EMS people, so that is going to require us to do that again. So but I don't want to put this off too long, because I see it not as much as I would like to. I don't quite have the time that I used to, but I see it pretty much every day, and I hear it every day. Something's got to be done, and we can't keep putting it off. So I want to try to get it back here as quickly as we can, and we'll work with staff to make sure that that's done in a timely fashion. But I would encourage my colleagues, your phone's always on.
Yes, sir.
And if you're not on some major conflagration in a neighboring jurisdiction, you typically answer or get back as soon as we can. And there are other folks in the room that have put their heart and soul into this work as well. So I would encourage you to go down through the list and see those folks and call them. I think pretty much, you know, you've got folks from around the county that have been involved in this, and you can certainly reach out to the stations too. But so that's my 10 cents, I guess. This is a really fluid thing that we've got to make sure we do correctly, and I'm confident that we'll be able to do that. So I don't want to put it off too long, but we'll get it back on the schedule as quickly as we can.
Yes, sir.
And I want to thank you for all the work that all of you have done. Never in my days would I have thought, back in 1975, when a little old fire chief came down the driveway at my mom and dad's house and, you know, said, "Hey, you got in the fire company last night." I said, "Okay, well, what does that mean?" "Well, here's boots and a helmet. Come on down when the siren blows." Never did I think that we'd be here, but we are, and you all have done a yeoman's job at getting us to this point, so I appreciate it as well. So we'll get you back on the schedule here as quickly as we can, and I encourage my colleagues to reach out with questions.
How about fire God?
Just like to say 14-0 would be much better for me.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you guys
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it.
I will see you Saturday night.
It's going to be a good time.
All right.
All right.
Commissioner,
Yes.
two general public comments.
Okay, yeah. We've got a couple public comments, so for those of you that are exiting, see the nearest fire exit to your left and do so in an efficient manner so we can continue to move on here.
Okay, the first one is Robert Smith.
Mr. Okay, who? Okay,
If that's okay. Okay, Dr. Tyler.
okay. This microphone right here, sir. Yep, yep.
Gentlemen, I'm sure you know who I am, at least by name.
Hold on just a sec. Hey, Don, make sure that, or Perry, make sure that door gets closed, will you please? Thank you.
Hard to get a large crowd. Thank you. Go ahead.
Gentlemen,
Okay.
I'm sure you know who I am by name. I'm Dr. John Tyler. I have repeatedly contacted almost every one of you here present today, including Ms. Wyndham and County Attorney Tim Burke. I was illegally evicted from my place of employment. I owned and operated two businesses and my home of 30 years that I owned outright. There's no doubt that the court documents were falsified. However, that eviction was carried out through the Carroll County Sheriff's Office. I have repeatedly contacted you for compensation to get me back on my feet because I have absolutely no income. This has been going on for years. I've been ignored. The entire issue has been circumscribed. And yet, your county principals say that you basically look out for people's property. Not to mention the fact that the Fourth Amendment of this Constitution of the United States protects me from illegal search and seizure. There's no doubt there's been a lot of wrongdoing here. There's no doubt that I was illegally evicted from my home and place of business. But yet, none of you commissioners that I've contacted have done anything for me other than, after 2 years of contacting this commission, I finally received a letter dated January 4th, 2019 from Mr. Burke that says, among other things, this is an accounting responsibility. Never one to be phased. I went to private counsel. I went to the governor of Maryland. The governor's representative told me, as did private counsel, this is a county responsibility. Gentlemen, all I'm looking for is just and adequate compensation for being illegally evicted from my home and the destruction of my two businesses. It is so bad now, my dog is waiting for me in my car. I'm hoping to have enough money in my pocket to rent a room in Gettysburg so I can take my car to the Gettysburg Auto Auction so I can have some money to last me a couple of months. This is unacceptable that you have ignored this issue for years. 2 years, emails, registered letters, telephone calls. I have received nothing other than a childishly drafted letter from Mr. Burke that says, it's not our problem. It is the county's problem. It is the county's responsibility. I am not a stupid person. I have 2 PhDs. I know what the deal is here. I know what transpires in the Orphans Court of Maryland, Carroll County. That's why the Office of the Prosecutor is involved. I just want a fair and adequate compensation, settlement, and go on my way. That's all I want. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Other public commenters, Mr. Robert Smith.
Commissioners, my name is Robert Smith. On behalf of Dr. Tyler, I've known Dr. Tyler for the amount of nearly 12 years. I've been through his ups, I've been through his downs with him, and speaking of terms of losing his home, his work, his entirety livelihood, I truly think that the Carroll County is responsible for it. More so ever, I've been holding Dr. Tyler over with my SSDI check. I've been helping him make do the best I can until he gets this matter resolved. It's been spiraling down for Dr. Tyler, and I believe something ought to be brought to it. I think this ought to be brought to attention to every one of you that something needs to be done ASAP, if not sooner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Appreciate it.
That's it.
Okay. Anything else for open admin?
Well.
With the exception of that.
Normal stuff.
Agendas. All right, the week of February 11th, Tuesday the 12th, Target Community Site Visit, Commissioners Rothstein and Boucher. At 1 o'clock, we have an open work session, comprehensive rezoning. Tuesday the 12th is the Ag Center Dinner Board meeting, Commissioners Wance, Weaver, and Boucher. 13th finds Commissioner Rothstein and myself at Mako again. And at 7 p.m. on Wednesday the 13th is Carroll 101 at Carroll Community College, and all 5 of us will be attending that. Thursday the 14th, BWI Partnership Breakfast, Commissioner Rothstein at 7:30 a.m. We go into open at 10 a.m. We have an agency presentation. I guess that's just one left, perhaps. Weed control. Then we have
Keeps coming up.
request approval. This is a follow-up to the opioid national health. No, this is different. Briefing on request approval to accept opioid national health emergency grant funding. We have a briefing on grant contingent positions at Citizen Services. And then we have submission to planning and zoning, the county regional airport property for a future solar site. We move from there to a grant application and award, Chesapeake Bay Trust Restoration Research Program. We will exercise an option to purchase Critical Farm. And that's it for that day. Commissioner Weaver has the WTTR report that week. Any additions to that week?
Just to let you know, I'll also be attending the dinner, the Ag Center dinner on Tuesday.
Well, if you're going to be there.
Okay. The week of February the 18th, on Monday, just a reminder to everyone that we are closed in observance of President's Day. I always get those two mixed up. District 5 night is that evening in Annapolis, and Commissioners Rothstein, Weaver, and Boucher will be attending. On Tuesday the 19th, Planning and Zoning, Commissioner Rothstein at 9 a.m. Veterans Advisory Meeting at 2 p.m., Commissioner Weaver. And the Silver Run Union Mills Advisory Group meeting is that evening. I'll be there at Pleasant Valley. Wednesday, the 20th, at 7:30, I have a speaking engagement to the Mid-Atlantic Association of Golf Course Superintendents. Don't read anything else into that, please, or you can. It's fine.
Sounds super exciting.
It is.
What is a golf club superintendent?
So they're the folks that actually make the grass green.
Is this at Pebble Beach by any chance?
I wish it was, Sam. I wish it was. Unfortunately, it's in Clarksville.
We gotta go to
there's
Clarksville
that.
first next year.
You're right. Then we'll be in Mako, myself and Commissioner Rothstein. And that evening is also the Carroll Community College Board meeting. That's Commissioner Frazier. Thursday, the 21st, open session. We'll have a public hearing on the Veterans Shuttle. We have a Water and Sewer Master Plan Triennial Update. Again, I thought, is that the, what is that?
Decision.
We did that today.
That's the decision. No, that, you had your public hearing, you left the record open for 10
10
days.
Oh, that's the decision, right, okay. Wow. Bid approval for mowing and tree shelter maintenance, stormwater facility mowing, a bid approval for that, a couple of those. 3 of those. We'll have our legislative briefing from Mike Fowler at at some point that morning. And at noon on the 21st is the Chamber County Budget Luncheon with guest star Ted Zaleski. Typically, we all go to that.
Yeah, put me down for that.
So I would think list us all, and we'll take action accordingly through the chamber to make sure we know we're going to be there. 1:30, we have a work session on comprehensive rezoning again. Saturday, the 23rd at 9 a.m., Carroll County 4-H Judging Senior Ambassador interviews Commissioner Weaver, and Commissioner Frazier has the WTTR report. Any additions to the agendas? All right, I need a motion to go into closed.
One other open admin.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner, last week you had a closed session on January the 31st to discuss land acquisition. The discussion concerned the a possible offer for a small piece of land for a future park use. I need you to adopt this summary of the closed minutes, which is the closing statement from last week.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Make a motion to adopt the minutes from the closed.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you,
Just
Mr.
a
Burke.
proclamation.
Okay. I need a motion now to go into closed for personnel.
I move we go into closed for personnel reasons.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Then I need a motion to recess until 1 PM after that.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And that will be downstairs in the Reagan Room at 1 PM.
Are we?
Off to closed we go. Thank you.